Welcome to How to Use Inbound Marketing to Dramatically Increase Web Traffic, Get More Leads, and Earn Way More Sales, the first in a series of thought leadership webinars from BPO Media and Digitek. Our presenter today is going to be inbound marketing expert Marcus Sheridan. I'm Amy Weiss from BPO Media, which publishes the Imaging Channel, an integrated resource for the print and imaging industry that brings together the leading market information, business concepts, strategies, and people in management, and Workflow, a publication, website, and e-newsletter for the business process automation and content management industry. We're excited to bring you this webcast today. If you need technical assistance at any time during the presentation, please click the Help menu at the top right of your screen. If you have any questions, you can type them into the chat box on the left-hand side of the screen. If you missed any part of this webinar or want to replay it, an archive will be available. We'll be emailing the link to all registered attendees. And we'd like to thank our sponsor for this webinar, Digitek. And right now, I'm going to turn the mic over to Digitek's Senior Director of Solutions, Aaron Vick.
Hey, thanks a lot, Amy. Hey guys, I just really excited about this webinar, being able to set this up for you, and obviously having our guest speaker, Marcus Sheridan, come to this and share his insights and his successes with you. Here's what we know. We know the workplace is changing radically. It's global, it's connected, it's based on collaboration, and it requires agile thinking. And so as Digitek and Partner Pro, we've decided to put together some thought leadership webinars. Our whole goal here is to bring insightful speakers to address new business concepts and technologies to help our customers grow their business. And so today we're super excited to have Marcus Sheridan participate. Marcus is one of the founders of River Pools and Spas, one of the most successful pool builders in the entire country. River Pools is to content marketing what Zappos is to customer service. Marcus has been featured in multiple best-selling books, the New York Times, and many other publications around the world. And on that note, I'll turn it over to Marcus.
Well, hello, everyone, and I'm so glad you're here. We're going to have a great time today. We're going to be talking about the digital consumer and, of course, building your brand, trust, profits, all that good stuff. I want to make a quick note that if you do have a question, please don't hesitate to write in the chat bar that you see on the left side of your screen, and you can just type the question there, and if it fits, if I'm able to get to it, I will jump to it at that time. If not, you can email me directly or hit me up on the Twitters, and I'll answer it there. So let's jump right into it. I'm going to be speaking for about 35 minutes, and I promise it'll be fun, fast, and furious. Okay, so let's talk about this number 70% and zero moment of truth. I'm going to define zero moment of truth, and then we're going to talk about it. Zero moment of truth is the first time somebody actually contacts you. It's the first time that they walk into your store, your office, or they fill out a form on your website. It's the first time that you know that they exist because they have said essentially, hey, I might want to do business with you. And this is what we know because Forrester Research Group has told us this, as well as Google, and this started off as a B2B study and eventually became a B2C finding as well, and that is today 70% of the buying decision is made before zero moment of truth. We know that to be true. 70%. 70% of the buying decision is made before they call you, before they contact you, before they walk into your office, before they talk to your salespeople. And if that is true, what does it mean for organizations? Heck, look just back 10 years. What do you think this number would have been 10 years ago if we had said what percentage of the buying decision was made before zero moment of truth 10 years ago? Most of us would say something like 30% or 25%. So today we're at 70%. And so the question is, where are we going to be tomorrow? And what does this mean for organizations like yours? Because if you look at this, and if we're being honest with ourselves, we have to, or it begs the question, which department of your organization has a greater impact on the actual sale? Is it the sales department or is it the marketing department? And that, my friends, is the tell, because today marketing, based on every single finding, has a greater influence. But I'm not here to say that sales is dead. I'm just here to say that we got to change the way that we've always done it. Now, when I say the phrase used car or buy a used car or used car salesperson, what is the emotion you experience? Well, oftentimes, people have negative emotions. In fact, it's 100%. Every country that I've been to and asked this question, I speak all over the world, they have a negative emotion with this. And so the question is, why? Why do you have a negative emotion? You might say, well, experience has taught me that, but there's certain fears that you have when you're going to buy a used car. In fact, there's three major fears that you have when you're going to buy a used car. I'm just talking about the world in general. Number one, is you don't want to buy a lemon. Number 2, you want to make sure you're getting good value. Number 3, you don't want to deal with the salesperson, the haggling process. You don't like that. And there's many others that are on this list. In fact, there's one other that's major, and that is buyer's remorse. You don't want to feel like you've regretted your decision, right? And so a company came out 15 or so years ago called CarMax. You've probably heard of CarMax before. And the slide that I'm showing you is representative of a typical advertisement or a model that you can find on their website. So why am I showing you this? Well, CarMax did something very, very interesting over a decade ago. They said to themselves, our industry is messed up and people don't trust us. And the question is, why don't they trust us? And they literally looked at every reason why somebody would not buy a used car. And then they said to themselves, is it possible that we eliminate this fear? So I'm showing you this here on the screen because I want you to pay attention to some of the things that they've done. So let's look at the price here. The price of this vehicle is $27,998, but you notice next to it, it has no haggle price. This was the first major company that had no haggle pricing. They said everybody's afraid of salespeople, so let's stop doing this whole pressurized sales technique when they come into the showroom or onto the lot. Let's do it differently than everybody else. The second thing they did, right underneath that no haggle price, they have a 5-day money-back guarantee. You can bring that car back 4 days later and say it's not a good fit. And now what fear have they eliminated? Well, of course they've eliminated buyer's remorse. And then you see underneath that a clean title guarantee, a CarMax quality certified. They have this incredible inspection system that they show you if you walk into their store or if you read about it online, that helps you understand that it's very difficult for you to purchase somebody else's problems. They don't want to sell bad cars. So they don't want you to think that you're buying a lemon. They want to eliminate that fear. And what's interesting, too, about their website is they're willing to show you the good, the bad, and the ugly. Here you have 40 photos. So why am I telling you this? Because CarMax has embraced transparency so much that today they sell thousands of cars a month without anyone actually test driving the vehicle, which sounds absurd. And what's even more absurd is the idea of doing what they did. Because if you go back in time and you say to used car sales professionals 10 years ago, hey, let's have no haggle pricing. Let's offer a 5-day money-back guarantee. Let's do whatever we can not to sell a lemon. What you're going to find is everybody would have said you're crazy. And they said that about CarMax, and CarMax has reinvented the space, just like Zappos is doing today, just like Uber is doing. And everybody that is breaking the rules, they're the ones that are redefining their space. And it really starts with a great website. CarMax did that. They eliminated all your fears. They've tried to do it in a digital way. And so if you look at this thing called a great website, and you look at your website, how would you define the phrase great website today? Well, this has actually changed as well. Today, if you poll people around the world, they're going to tell you, I want to find what I'm looking for. I want to find it quickly. I want to find it fast. I want to find it now. That is the essence of a great web experience. And that is the essence of a great buying experience, be it online or off. That's also the essence of content marketing or inbound marketing. This really is a phrase that we're hearing so much today, and I think that most companies, unfortunately, don't understand it. So I'm going to give you a quick definition of content marketing, and then we're really going to dive into it. Content marketing is your company's ability to be the best and most helpful teacher in the world at what you do. The best and most helpful teacher in the world at what you do. And when you look at your website right now, do you see it as a teaching resource for consumers? If it's not a teaching resource, if it's not helping them solve their problems, then you are being left behind by those in your industry that are willing to do just that. Now, my quick story. I used to be a pool guy. In fact, today I'm still a silent partner with the largest fiberglass pool builder in the country called River Pools. But River Pools fell upon some hard times. We started in 2001, and things were going okay up until this particular date number. Do you know what this date number represents? If you guessed that this is the day of the crash, Lehman Brothers, yes, that was that day. Not a good day. Certainly not a good day for pool guys, because within 48 hours of this day, we lost 5 deposits of people that were getting an in-ground pull from us going into the off-season, going into the wintertime. They said, hey, Marcus, we just can't do it. We're afraid of what's happening with the banks, with the economy, and we just can't do this. We lost $250,000 in business over the course of those 48 hours. Now, for some of your companies, that's not a lot of revenue. For any swimming pool company, that's a lot of revenue. And over the coming months, things started to get worse and worse. And this is exactly where we were by January 2009. We were going over that edge. We were going to lose our company. We were going to file bankruptcy. In fact, every consultant that I talked to said, Marcus, you should file bankruptcy. But that wasn't an option because I was going to lose my home. My business partners were going to lose their homes. And so we had to figure out a way to generate more traffic, more leads, more sales without spending any money. Now, before I jump into this, I would ask you to not today, as you hear this webinar, be the exception to everything I'm getting ready to tell you. I'm getting ready to tell you things and recommend things to you that nobody has recommended to you before, probably, okay? And I say that based on all the audiences that I have spoken with and all the companies that we have worked with. I can tell you that 70% of our clients at my company, which is called the Sales Lion, Lion, 70% of our clients are B2B service-based businesses. So if you are a B2B service-based business, please don't think you're the exception. So we've had major success with B2B, B2C, service, product, big, small, national, local. The same things apply. So I'm asking you, please don't put yourself in that corner. So when we started to learn about the internet, and I was reading all these fancy phrases like inbound marketing, content marketing, social media marketing, basically what I kept hearing in my mind was, look, Marcus, if you're willing, take the time and hear the questions that your prospects and customers are asking, and then address them on your website, and do that consistently and prolifically, you just might save your business. You just might generate the traffic, sales, and leads that you need. And so our core philosophy as a business became they ask, you answer. And these 4 words, and I kid you not when I say this, have changed and saved businesses now all over the world. So let me give you an example of exactly what I mean by they ask, you answer. They ask, you answer is the opposite of ostrich marketing. What does an ostrich do when it has a problem? Well, it buries its head in the sand. Why does it do that? Well, it thinks the problem's going to go away, but does the problem never go away? And of course the answer is no, the problem never goes away. So what does this have to do with you and your business? Well, has there ever been a question that you've gotten from a prospect or a customer where you said to yourself, you know what, we really can't address that on the website. Why don't we wait till we're face-to-face with the prospect or the customer? I'm sure you've gotten those questions before. And if you can't think of one right now, you're going to think of a bunch in a second, because in every industry, this ostrich marketing is a huge problem. It's the antithesis of they ask, you answer. Specifically, what companies are afraid to talk about is what I call the big 5. Now, in every single industry, I do not care what you sell, service, product, B2B, B2C, big, small, there are 5 subjects that move the needle, 5 subjects that win. A person, an individual, an organization is getting ready to make a buying decision. They research these 5 things. The 5 subjects are cost questions. They want to know the problems and the issues, potentially, of their decision. They want to have comparisons, or they want to compare their option with other options, your option with other options. They want to know reviews of the product or the service of the company, and they want to know the best thing, the best option, the best company, etc. This is the way that you search. It's the way that I search. It's the way that we think. It's what we look for when we are getting ready to buy something. And what's crazy is although this runs the economy for consumers, businesses run away from it because they're afraid to address each one of these on their website. So let's talk about it individually. And I need you to stay with me because this is fun. But like I said, and I wasn't lying to you, as you can tell, it will be fast. So have you, in the last year, researched how much something costs online? My guess is, if you're alive, you're shaking your head yes. And when you're on a website and you can't find anything about cost and price, what is the emotion you experience in that moment? My guess now is that you just said frustrated. I feel frustrated. I always say that is the F word of the internet, frustrated. So what gives you the right in that moment to feel frustrated? Well, you say, well, Marcus, I am the customer. I'm the consumer. It's my right to know. And then I would ask you, well, as the customer, in this moment of frustration, do you say to yourself, Well, I'll just keep looking on this website. I'm sure eventually I'll find the answer. That's silly. You don't do that, do you? Or do you say to yourself, well, that's okay that they're not willing to address this. They're a value-based business. I'll call them instead. You don't call them either because you stop doing that. And instead of calling, instead of digging deeper, what do? You keep looking. You keep searching. And you do that until you find the answer you were looking for. And when you find the answer you're looking for, generally speaking, that company gets your business, or at least they get that first phone call or that first contact, that thing that we started with, 0 moment of truth. And to further add to this, the real reason why you're getting upset in this moment as a customer, as a consumer, is because you know that they know as the business the answer to your question. And you now feel like because they're not willing to address that thing that they know, they are hiding something from you. And the moment you feel like anybody is hiding something from you online, all trust is gone. In the business that you're in the business I'm in, no matter what it is, whether it's cars or whether it's services, no matter what it is, it's about trust. Trust. And the moment that we embrace that reality is the moment we start to have more success. Now, how many of you that are listening to this right now talk a lot about cost and price on your website? Well, if you're like pretty much all my audiences, less than 10% of you listening right now talk about cost and price, and at least a decent amount on your website. And of course, what's your justification? Well, you say, Marcus, I'm afraid my competitors will know, even though your competitors probably already know your cost and prices, just like you know their cost and prices. You say, well, Marcus, I don't want to scare the customer away. But what we just established is what actually scares people away is not discussing cost and price. And the third reason you don't do it, and I put that in air quotes, is because you are saying to yourself, well, our costs vary. Well, it depends, Marcus. Well, of course it depends. And if you wanted to, you could explain to me what would drive it up, what would drive it down. My question for you is, what does a fiberglass pool cost, by the way? Well, of course, the answer is the same it is for you. When we embrace this philosophy of they ask you answer, one of the first articles that we wrote on our website was, how much does a fiberglass pool cost? And we said, you know, it's kind of like buying a car. There's a lot of options. There's a lot of accessories. Here's a list of all those options and accessories. And here's a list of some of the different packages that people choose and some big price ranges that might fall under. But ultimately, the answer to your question is, it depends. But because we were willing to say it depends, what happened next? Well, from a search perspective, what did our friend Google do? Well, if Google was a human, they would have said something like this. Finally, somebody's willing to address this stupid question that consumers keep typing in this rectangular box of mine all day long, and none of these pool guys want to answer the question. But we have finally addressed the question. And from a search perspective, within 48 hours, if you went online and you searched how much does a fiberglass pool cost, price fiberglass pool cost, how much does it cost to install a pool, this was the first one that you saw. Now, if you're on the internet right now, which I'm sure you are, open up a window, test it out, type in how much does a fiberglass pool cost. You'll see this article, you'll see what I'm talking about. But that's just visitors. That doesn't mean anything until we get to the actual revenue generated. So let's look at the revenue generated for a second. Here is the major keywords that generated the most visitors to our website over the course of 3 years. Each one in red is a visitor that initially landed on that article and then eventually fill out a form. So let me give you an example I'm talking about. Let's look at the top arrow. Fiberglass pool prices. We had 13,500 people type in the phrase fiberglass pool prices into Google. Of those 13,500 that landed on the site, 30 of them filled out a form and said, I want to get a quote from you, right? So now they're a lead, marketing qualified lead. So we have over 200 sales appointments that occurred because of this article. My question for you is, how many of these sales appointments occur if this article is never written? And of course, the answer is none, or 0 to 5. And it doesn't occur because they never find us. They never show up to the website because Google has nothing to show them, but they did show up. And we do know which ones bought. We do know which ones bought, and we know the value of each one of those sales, and therefore we can track the value back to this one single article. We know that this one single article generated for our company over $3 million in sales. $3 million we never would have had we not been willing to address that question. $3 million all because we were not the ostrich with our head in the sand. $3 million because we were willing to explain why. It depends. I'm telling you, for all the clients that we've ever had at the sales line, for over 90% of them, the number one traffic, lead, and sales-generating content has to do with money, cost, price, rates. Talk about cost and price on your website. Think about all the different ways that people ask about how much your stuff costs. Write individual articles and produce individual videos about those things. I'm telling you, you're going to see results. Each example that I show you here within the Big Five, you'll be able to apply to you. I'm going to use pools as the example, but hopefully you're going to see, my goodness, this absolutely applies to us. Let's look at problems. For years, people used to say to me, Marcus, be honest, what are the potential problems with a fiberglass pool? And how many pool guys do you think had ever addressed that question on their website? Well, if you guessed 0, you're right. Nobody wanted to address this question either. And so we actually were willing to address this question. And because we wrote an article about the problems with fiberglass pools, today if you go online and you search problems with fiberglass pools, of course, this is the first article that you are going to read. Now, why is this significant? Well, here's a list of the keywords that generated the most sales appointments for our company over the course of 2 years. The number one keyword that generated the most sales appointments over the course of 2 years, other than the name of our company, which I don't really count because they already knew who we were, was fiberglass pools problems. 32 sales appointments, all because we were willing to talk about the problems with our stuff. That generated over $500,000 in sales. How many times have you been asked, so if I choose that option, that route, that thing, that widget, what are the potential problems? What are the potential issues? I'm sure you've been asked before. I would ask you to consider addressing it on your website. Let's look at another one. Versus and comparisons. Again, we'll use pools as an example, but over the years, I am sure that you've been asked many times, so if you were me, which would you choose? Well, let's say hypothetically, you're looking at a concrete and a fiberglass pool. Let's say you don't know the difference between the two pools, and you want to, of course, choose the right one for you. Well, we always used to get the question, Marcus, so tell me, which is better, a concrete or a fiberglass pool? And, of course, no pool guys had addressed that on their website either. And why? Because they were afraid to address the elephant in the room. Again, it doesn't pay to be the ostrich. You've got to be the one that's willing to hold the conversation. You've got to be the Wikipedia. You've got to be the Yahoo Answers. You've got to be the BBB, the Angie's List, and all these things. That needs to be you and your website, your company. That's the way that you need to communicate. And so, of course, we wrote an article, Concrete versus Fiberglass versus vinyl liner pools, an honest comparison, and we actually gave an honest comparison of the pros and the cons of each type of pool, despite the fact that we only sell fiberglass pools. What was the result? Well, today, if you go online and if you're still got your little Google machine open as you're watching this, just type in one of these, concrete versus fiberglass pools. You'll see the article. You'll see exactly the one little article that generated hundreds of thousands in revenue. You've got to be willing to address the thing. Now, I've got one more of these big five. I've shown you 3. I'm going to combine the last 2. But before I go on, let's review. We've talked about cost questions. We've talked about problems questions. We've talked about comparison-based questions. I want you to think, along with your team, all the times and the questions you've gotten related to these 3 items. Chances are there's hundreds, and I'm not exaggerating when I say that. Write them down. And if you address each one on your website as well as you can, each with an individual article or video, blog article, whatever you want to call it, it's just another page of your website, you're going to be successful. So let's look at the last one, and this is going to be the most, how should I put this, controversial, make you slap your forehead moment of the day, because it's very, very contrary to the way that you've always done and seen business. And with this one, we're going to talk about reviews and best of. So have you ever been asked before, hey, look, we really like you. We like your company, but if we don't use you, is there anybody else that you might recommend? Well, if you've ever been asked that question, it's a good sign because it means people actually trust you. Now, how do most companies answer that? Well, I can tell you how they answer it. they're usually not going to give an answer, or they're usually going to say something silly like, oh, nobody's quite like us. And the whole time, the person that asked the question is thinking, come on, can you just give me an answer? You know, one night I was in Richmond, Virginia, back when I was still a pool guy, and this one couple that I've been with for a couple hours, they said to me, Marcus, we really like you, but if we don't use your swimming pool company, is there anybody else that you'd recommend? Now, I did not get the business that night, but I did have a long drive home, and I thought to myself, you know what? They asked the question, which means I need to answer it. And so I went home and I wrote this article right here. Who are the best pool builders in Richmond, Virginia? And I came up with a list of 5 of the best pool builders in Richmond, Virginia. Now, am I on that list of 5? Yes or no? What say you? Believe it or not, the answer is no. You say, what do you mean no? Well, if I put myself on a best of list, what happens to my credibility? Of course, I lose it. And everything we're talking about today is about trust. Trust where you get more trust, more traffic from searchers and search engines. And so that's beside the point, though, the fact that I'm not on the list. Because if they're reading this, where are they? Well, first of all, they're on my website. But secondly, you look at these first 2 paragraphs here. If you went online right now and you typed in Best Pool Builders, Richmond, Virginia, and you immediately stumbled across this article, you would see this. Each year, we at River Pools and Spas meet with well over 100 households in the Central Virginia, Richmond area with respect to their in-ground swimming pool installation. And because so many folks know our thoughts and feelings from this website on all things pool construction, they often ask us, who are some of the other builders and competitors we have in the area? Never once to shy away from being blatantly honest with respect to the competition. Here's a list of some of the companies that have a solid in-ground pool building history in the Richmond area. Okay, so there we have it. Now, quickly, you feel like this company is honest. You trust them. You also feel like they're an expert, even though they didn't say they're an expert. So what was the result of this article right here? Well, today, if you go online and you search Best Pool Builders, Richmond, Virginia, of course, this is the one that you see first, but that's not the coolest part. The coolest part is, let's say you didn't even know who River Pools was. Let's say you went online and you searched for reviews, Playmore Pools. That's our biggest competitor in Richmond. So reviews, Playmore Pools, Richmond, Virginia. Once you get past a sponsored search, that's the top advertisement that nobody's going to click on anyway. The first one that you're going to see, the first one that you're going to read, the first one that you're going to click is us. That article. And that's why today, whenever anyone is researching our competitors, they generally research them on our website. That article has made us hundreds of thousands in sales. And I've done this very same thing with many of our clients, once again, B2B and B2C around the world. We do it in diverse ways each time, but the principle is the same. We're willing to address the question that the consumer has. And because of that, they're incredibly successful. And so what was the result with River Pools? When we started this process of They Ask You Answer in February of 2009, we had all of 2,000 visitors coming to the website per month. But we embraced that philosophy. We produced the text and the video, and we barely made it through that first year. Now, that green that you see is that organic traffic, that free traffic from Google that you get from search engines. And so by the second year, I knew we were onto something. Third year it grew. Fourth year really grew. Fifth year it grew. And you can see over the last few years, it has really, really grown. Today, we're getting 500,000 visitors a month. And River Pools is the most trafficked swimming pool website in the world. And it all happened, though, because we said we are going to become the Wikipedia of our industry. That's us. That's what we are going to be. If anybody has a question, whether it's good, bad, or ugly, we're going to be willing to address it. One last point before we move on from this lovely webinar and conversation. Hopefully you feel like you're a part of it, even though you can't talk, which is the one bummer of webinars. But, hey, we can still feel like we're having a conversation, right? So, last little section here. How many pages of your website would a potential client or customer be willing to read on average? Well, say you. Well, I can tell you that the average person or the average company says 2 to 3 pages. How long does it take to read 2 to 3 pages of a website? Well, let's just call it 5 minutes. 5 minutes. So I'm going to rephrase this initial question. Would you say doing business with you is worth more or less than 5 minutes of somebody's time? I'd argue it's worth way more than 5 minutes of somebody's time. In fact, to prove my point, let me tell you about an incredible discovery I had with my swimming pool company. At the beginning of 2012, this number 30 changed my life dramatically. I was looking at 2 groups of people from our website. Both had filled out a form and said, I want to get a quote. All right? So they both filled out a form, said, I want to get a quote for a pool. One of the groups did not buy a pool. One of the groups did buy a pool. And so I was comparing, what is the difference between just the ones that were leads versus the ones that became actual sales and generated revenue? And then the number 30 kept jumping out underneath the group that had bought. What do you think that number 30 represented? Well, if you guessed total pages viewed, you were right. This is what we found. The discovery was that if somebody read 30 or more pages of our website before the initial sales appointment, they would buy 80% of the time. Average closing rate in our industry, 25%. It would go from 25 to 80% closing rate, all because of content. And if you knew as a business that all you had to do was get someone to read or consume a certain number of pieces of your content, and things would dramatically change, and closing rates would go up dramatically, what would you do differently? Well, of course, you'd want to have more content, and of course, you'd want it to be about them, about their questions, but you've got to integrate it into your sales process. And I realized we've been doing that the wrong way. For the longest time, people would contact us, and they would say, hey, can you come out to my house for a sales appointment? Could you meet with us? And we would simply say yes. We didn't do our due diligence. We didn't make sure they were educated, and we certainly didn't integrate content into our sales process. But we started to integrate content into the sales process. And once we did, things started to get really, really interesting. So we started to see experiences like the one I'm getting ready to show you all the time. What I'm getting ready to show you is real. It's a lead sheet, all right? And by the way, this advanced, some of you are thinking, Marcus, where did you get all these numbers, these analytics from? Well, that tool that I use is called HubSpot, H-U-B-S-P-O-T. H-U-B-S-P-O-T. If you have any questions about it, feel free to email me, Marcus1, M-A-R-C-U-S, at the Sales Lion, Marcus1 at the Sales Lion, or Marcus at the Sales Lion. It's fine. I'll answer any questions you have about it. Continuing. So this is a real person. His name is William Grizzard. We'll call him Bill Grizzard. We can see here that he did, under the lead source, top arrow, he did an organic search in Yahoo, and he searched for the phrase cost of fiberglass pool. Okay, so he lands on that article, how much does a fiberglass pool cost? But something very interesting happened next. What happened next was he read 375 pages of the website. Holy cow. What can we surmise right now about Bill Grizzard? Well, you might be saying to yourself, he's got way too much time on his hands. He must be retired. He must be a competitor. All right. Well, that same night, we got another lead sheet, and this is from Mrs. Grizzard. She also did an organic search using Yahoo. She types in Richmond, Virginia pools, and she had read 149 pages of the website. Between these two people, how many pages of the website have they now read? Well, they've now read over 500 pages of the website. So you tell me, what do you think that sales appointment was like? Well, if you guess that I got there, and Bill Grizzard was standing there with a spreadsheet in his hands that had the pool he was getting and every option accessory he was getting with it, and all he needed from me was one little thing, which was the price, you are right. In fact, I walked out of that house in less than an hour with a signed contract and a deposit, and as I drove away, I started to laugh to myself because I realized something. I realized that I hadn't done any sales at all that day. In fact, he was so far beyond 70%, he was at 99.999%. My only job that day was to not screw it up. And we started seeing those types of sales experiences occur all the time. And the clients that we have worked with, when they truly integrate content in the sales process, they see the exact same thing. And that is why I'm telling you, content, assuming it's honest and transparent, online and off, it's the greatest sales and trust building tool in the world today, without question. You cannot just depend on salespeople to do your selling any longer. You've got to start building relationships long before that moment where you're sitting in the boardroom or you're meeting with them face-to-face and shaking their hand. We've got to do it very, very differently, okay? And so we've got to make sure that we are embracing content. Now, every business that's listening to this right now, whether you're in the office supply industry or any industry, I need you to think to yourself, how many questions have you gotten over the years about that thing that you sell? Some of them are incredibly common questions. You need to be willing to address them on your website. Also, like CarMax. Think of all the reasons why people don't do business with you. There's always reasons. Be honest with yourself. Now, ask yourself, how many of those fears as to why people do not do business with us, how many have we addressed on the website already? How many are addressed right now? If you list 7 fears as to why people don't buy from you, which is a minimum number, I can tell you that the average company has addressed 1 to 2 of those on their website. Why are you addressing all the fears after they've met with the salespeople? There's a very good chance you've lost a huge percentage by that point. Remember, this is as much a B2B as it is a B2C. This has nothing to do with pools. One final point about that. In 2013, we sold 95 swimming pools. And I can tell you the average number of pages that our typical customer read that year because of the advanced analytics that we have. And the average number of pages was 105, that number you see on the screen. Now, if you come to me 6 years ago when we started this process and said, Marcus, do you realize your average customer would be willing to read over 100 pages of your website before they buy? I would have said, you're crazy. I would have said, you're nuts. I would have said, you don't know what you're talking about, and I would have been dead wrong. I'm asking you to stop underestimating just how much content your prospects and customers are willing to consume through text, through video, through audio, if you're but willing to speak their language, to talk about the things that they want to talk about, to address the hard subjects. Final little point, little story, okay? I shared this story about river pools about 2 years ago at a conference. And when I was done, this reporter came up to me, and he said, Marcus, this is really interesting. I think I want to do a story on it. I didn't think anything of it until I met with that reporter for about 90 minutes on the phone a few days later. And then they sent a photographer to my swimming pool company. And then on the cover of the small business section of the New York Times appeared this article. And here's what's crazy about this article. I want you to look at the title. A revolutionary marketing strategy. Answer customers' questions. Is there anything revolutionary about answering your customers' questions? Well, in principle, of course not. But in practice, absolutely. This became the #1 shared and emailed story for the business section of the Times for 3 straight days. They reran it again that Saturday. And I got over 1,000 emails in the coming months from people just like you listening to this. And they said essentially one of 2 things every single time almost. First thing they said is, Marcus, my goodness, that thing you did with your swimming pool company is so simple. Why have we not done that? I agree. Very simple. Just listen obsessively and answer their questions through text and video on your site. Second thing that happened that they said is, Marcus, I feel like you've given me permission to do that which I've always felt we should be doing. I'm just asking you to do that which you've already felt you should be doing. And if you do that, everything will change. That your business can dramatically change. Look, I know some of you have more questions and you want a lot more answers. I have a free ebook on my site. You can just download it in 30 seconds, literally at thesalesline.com. So check it out there. If you have a personal question for me, email me. I've seen this work for brands that I've worked with. I've seen it work for small businesses. So please, as I've said a million times, but I've just got to say it one more time, don't be the exception today. Embrace the things that you've heard. Aaron, it's been great. I'll turn it over to you, brother.
Hey, awesome. Thanks a lot, Marcus. Listen, I mean, I got a ton of great points out of that. I mean, there's a huge shift in the industry, in the world, actually, in regards to connecting buyers to sellers. And a couple of things that stood out for me, what you were going over, Marcus. Control the conversation. Be seen as a trusted advisor. I think that's hugely important. Talk about costs on your websites. Why not be transparent? Let's let people know where we're at. And really, 70% of the folks are down the buying path before they engage a sales rep. And I loved your example of CarMax as well. So thank you very much. The purpose of the Thought Leadership webinar is really to just, show change and really help our folks from a Digitek perspective grow their business. And Amy, I've put together a video that maybe you can play for the folks that talks a little bit about how Digitek's involved in inbound marketing and how folks on the call can get engaged with support from Marcus and Digitek for their business. Great. Thanks a lot, guys. Appreciate you taking the time to jump on the call today, and look forward to more thought leadership webinars from Digitek and Partner Pro. Thanks, Marcus.